Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Fan Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 7th and 8th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to Kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Gelber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hey everybody, this is welcome to Silverline Silver Sunday. I am the guest host, Roland Mann's substitute, Tom Mason, and joining me tonight so far is that Man of the Mask guy, Mike Belcher, who you can see on the other side. Hey Mike, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. I think I see the tumbleweeds go by. I think we're pretty much on our own tonight.
All right, so let's talk about the weather then, and our favorite TV shows.
Exactly.
So Roland, we don't know where Roland is tonight. Oh, hey, there's Tommy.
Hey, there's Tommy.
Hey, Tommy, how you doing?
No, it's not. It's not Thomas. I don't know.
What are you in the ballroom of a hotel?
No, this is all my background's disappeared. I got computer issues. I'll fix it. Hold on, give me a minute.
Right.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Madness from the Pops from the Madness Comic Network says, "Hey, yo," and I bet he's gonna make a comment here in about 2 seconds. So anyway, Roland Mann is out tonight. Does anybody know where he is? Or are we not supposed to know?
He is, and he went to a college football game. And he is driving right now. I don't know why he doesn't come on, because he knows good and well that you can log in while you're in the car, because I do it all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, he gave us a road report.
The great thing about technology is that you can do things like that.
Yeah, for the Wednesday group, it happens right when I finish my night bike ride that I always do, and so I always log in like the last 30 minutes of the show, all nasty and sweaty and stuff, and I'm still while I'm driving in the car trying to avoid the police. Hopefully, they don't see me while I'm talking on the phone.
I'm sure it's appreciated. So, Madness says if you would like to bring your own show or become a sponsor of the Madness Entertainment Group, please contact us at Madness Comic on X. Pops Fanzant on Facebook at Pops at themeg.tv. And also Geek View Tavern, who is I happen to know is actually Dave Olbrich, says, "Hey gang."
Oh, hey, cool.
So hey Dave, how was the Vikings football game? So we're. I don't think Roberta's joining us either.
No, it doesn't look like it. Hey, and before Hyper Potato can come on, remember to like and share and subscribe to our channel. It helps us grow.
Yeah, listen, hey, don't piss off Hyper Potato because he gets mad if you don't like or subscribe.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think we have a Silverline crowdfunder to plug. I think we don't have a new one up
sure
yet.
What the next one is? I'm not exactly certain.
I'm thinking it's Beyond the Stars 4, but I may be speaking out of turn on that one.
But which is the conclusion.
No, it's still. There's 6 issues in it. It's the 4th issue. So.
Don't listen to me then. I know nothing.
Because I've got it to letter and it's done. So
okay.
I can see it being maybe the next one. I don't know.
All right. Well, I make a terrible rolling man then because I can't plug anything correctly. All right. So tonight, we're going to be talking about a subject that is near and dear to Roland's heart because he picked it, and
then he's not here for it.
And he's not here, and it's basically our favorite comics. And that means comic books, so we can't say George Carlin or Groucho Marx.
Oh man, I had it wrong this whole time. I've been writing down my favorite Eddie Murphy jokes.
That's yeah. You can't tell those. You can't tell those on the stream.
Oh, he's got a couple of non-bad ones.
You got one on hand? You got one on hand?
No, I don't have to.
That's
So you called me out. You got me. I didn't do it.
You weren't ready. All right, so. It's funny because favorite comics aren't necessarily best comic. It's not necessarily the best written comic or the best drawn comic. It's not necessarily the most popular comic or the best selling comic, but it's one that is sort of near and dear to our hearts. And if it's a great comic, that's cool. And if it's a terrible comic, but we just happen to love it so much, that's still cool too. Because there are tons of comics that nobody else likes that I dearly, dearly love, and I think that's true for all of us.
They don't have to be key comics to be good comics.
Yeah, that's right. And because sometimes it's the first comic, or sometimes it's the first comic that made you cry, or sometimes it's the first comic that made you laugh, or sometimes it's the first comic where you got to the last page and said, I got to get that next issue.
True.
And sometimes it's just a favorite creator doing some of his best work, where it's like, I don't care about the story. I care about that 2-page spread, or I care about that cover, or I care about, the introduction of a new character. And that could be your favorite as well. So let's weigh in. And if you people in the comments want to pop in and say something, that's cool too. So let's go. Tommy, what do you got?
I'm trying to fix my background.
Sorry, Tommy's got a
my and I've showed it before. Besides the all those Calvin and Hobbes stuff, which made it so basic. It's what I based all my Zomboy stuff off. It's Calvin and Hobbes meets the Avengers kind of thing.
Right.
It's always been the Calvin and Hobbes, but some of my early stuff that I've always liked it. I don't know, but before I started getting into like regular comics and stuff, I for whatever reason I've always liked, and I've pulled this out. I've always liked Mad Magazine, even as a little kid. For some reason, I don't even know when it came out. I'm just trying to what's in my head of when things happen. I have no idea, but I remember early on, it was always Spy versus Spy. The two dudes fighting it out, doing the stupid little one jokey things, and I think that has a lot to do with when I do my own comics. It's all just little gag type stuff over and over, and I think that has a lot to do with like the Spy versus, because it just leads up where one person pulls out a gun and the gun turns out to be a squirt gun, and it's all kind of just
right, and then the wall collapses on him.
And
because I think for me, when I discovered Mad Magazine, it wasn't the magazine; it was the paperbacks.
Yeah,
and
it was a buddy, and I'm trying to remember. I think we were in the 6th grade, 5th grade, so ever how old that was. I remember he liked Crack magazine. I remember Crack.
Yeah.
The Mad Magazine, they were always fighting.
It's the Mad Magazine you buy off Temu.
Yeah, that's what.
But that was crazy that Marvel put out.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He was the clown.
He was a big Crack magazine guy, and I was a big Mad Magazine guy, and and that's where I started liking all the crazy. I'm just drawing a blank of the main guy that would do all the caricatures of everybody.
Oh, Mort Drucker, Jack Davis.
Yeah, there you go, Mort Drucker. Thank you. I'm terrible with names. I don't know if you guys know that or not. But
I'll go Mort Drucker.
Mort Drucker. Yeah, no, Mort Drucker is to me is one of the gods of caricaturing. But one of the books but as far as comics go, besides all of, I've got a bunch of early, whatever it was, Amazing Spider-Mans and Webs. I've got some of those early Web of Spider-Mans way back when I was little. But the book that made me really want to do, or really like Spider-Man is because my buddy was a big Superman fan, and he had this book. Oh, shit. There it is. Ooh, sorry. No cousin. Even though Roland's not here, no cousin still. Can you see it? Oh,
Yeah.
man, stupid blue screen thing. There you go. Yeah, so it's that big oversized.
Your Treasury editions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I remember he had this big monster book. Golly, that's just not coming through at all, is it?
No, your foreground is bad now too.
Yeah, but he had just got this, and I was getting some Spider-Man stuff, but he was a big Superman fan, and he got this from somewhere, and his mom ended up going to wherever it was that they picked it up, and I have no idea what newsstand that would have put this big monster thing on, but she got me a copy when I was little, and I lost it since then, and then I picked up a new copy just in the past couple of years. One of the people that buys a lot of comics.
It's Ross Andrew, isn't it?
The penciler?
Yeah.
See, I'm terrible with names. You're correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Dick Giuliani. Yeah. Gary Coyne. But yeah, this is one of my very, 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 besides all the just random.
And it's
Spider-Man
weird
stuff.
because it's one of those team ups where for some reason Superman, the all powerful being, is ready to fight somebody who is just a kid with spider powers.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to fix my stupid blue green screen thing because it's not working too well.
All right, so Mr. Belcher.
Well, as far as favorite issues are, when we're young, we just collect what we can get.
Yes.
When I was, I had 4 grocery stores and pharmacies and no comic shops when I first started collecting.
Right.
And you catch things. And then when I started really getting to collecting, I got lucky. The big city of Kentucky, which is Lexington, or Lowell, depending on which side you want to go with, at a comic shop. And I had discovered the works of Matt Wagner in the pages of DC's Demon. And then by that virtue, I found out about Mage.
Right.
And needless to say, I couldn't find Mage. So at this one visit to the comic shop in Lexington, I found Mage 14. This was the only issue that I could find. And as most of us would agree, that's probably the absolute worst time because it was 15 issues.
Right,
So that was 15. It was the issue before the end. And as a 12 or 13-year-old kid, I'm thinking, well, I had this hard time finding this. Well, I'm just going to read this. And the reason it's probably one of my favorite issues is I wasn't lost.
Right.
The story, it basically is a conversation of the 2 leads. And they don't, I wouldn't say, give details of the previous 13 issues.
Right.
But I got everything I needed. And I probably read this thing easily, 30 times the first month I had it.
Wow.
It had that much of an impact on me because the characters were so real to me. They just felt so, and like I said, even though I was stepping in pretty much the penultimate chapter
Right.
of this whole story, when years later I was able to get the rest of the book, the rest of the issues, it was a surprise, but it was like an addition to. It was
Right.
like I kind of knew where things were going because heck, even this was the issue after a major character was killed, and I think I mourned her worse had I not gone through the entire, the previous 13 issues first,
Right.
because I knew it was coming.
Oh, by the way, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't read.
It's 40-year-old story. I hope not. But that's the power. That's the power of a good comic. And like I said, it's not a key issue. It's not. You won't see tons of people slamming them. But this was, when Roland came up with this topic, this was the very first issue that I thought of, because, it meant that, it has meant that much to me. I mean, it's just it's a very personal connection to comics, because, it taught me a lot just by reading it.
The thing, I mean, we had Wagner on the show like a couple months ago, and at least I think we did.
Yeah,
and that's good. And I think that one of the things that I remember about the Mage and Grendel stuff is he was really young.
Yeah,
like he was basically the age of the audience at the time he was doing this stuff, and he was still. I mean, he's gotten tons better, but he was still fully formed as a creator, I thought.
Very much so. I mean, I think he's only 10 years older than me. I think he's 63. I'm going to be 52. So, I mean, he wasn't too far off where I was at in the world. And
right.
And for somebody to have such a grasp of able, like I said, this was the 14th issue. And actually, I finally got to meet him in person last week in Cincinnati.
Hey, congratulations.
And like I said, I got this signed. And that is what my biggest story about this, because like I said, Mage 14, you would not be thinking it's something that you would really,
no.
Like I said, but it really amazed me how much, and like I said, I still get chills when I think of the story.
Because what's interesting is it's not an industry key issue, but it's a Mike Belcher key issue.
Very much so. Very, like I said, if it's not one of the tops, it's number 2. I mean, it's just. Like I said, it was a no think when Roland came up with the topic. I thought, okay, right. I got that one down.
Yeah, that's it. Now, when you first got it, did you notice it was different from the Marvel and DC stuff? Did you have enough awareness to figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a DC guy, and like I said, with being, pretty much relegated to pharmacies and grocery stores, you got the newsstand stuff, which wasn't independent.
Right.
And then when I got, I was able to go to the comic shop once a year in Lexington. That's where I found the Nexuses and the Grim Jacks, and like I said, the Mage and the Grendels, and eventually Kimiko had newsstand distribution. So I was lucky once I started getting into the Matt Wagner world. When he started the Grendel series, I had, he was put there. Kimiko was putting it on the newsstand.
Right.
So I was getting more, from my little town, I was able to start getting more indie stuff that really, as much as I was into the Supermans and the Batmans, the indie world really fueled me, because it was markedly different. You saw just as much,
right,
if not better, as far as, like I said, the Nexus, the Baron and Rude Nexus. And like I said, Wagner with Mage and Grendel, I mean, this was stuff that was, they weren't doing that in the mainstream world that I was seeing.
So before we move forward, Madness Comic Network says that Spider-Man Superman most uneven crossover match in history. And
until he got Spider-Man got some super juice, and then it rated some.
Then it was okay. And then Dave Rio says, "I'm with you, Mike. For me, he joined at Mage 9, so he's bragging already." And so for me, 14 was fantastic as we saw Mirth returning. Yeah. So there you go. That's right. Because Rios was on the show with us with Matt Wagner.
Yeah.
And he's also a huge Wagner follower. So what's interesting though is that your favorite comics both seem to have propelled you to create comics.
Oh yeah, I mean, not to name drop Matt again, but I got to see him and I actually got to give him books. And I said, well, here are books because you're over half the reason I even want to do this.
Right.
And and really that is the love of great creators doing great work and thinking maybe I could do that too.
Now, what about you, Tom? Because it sounds like as soon as you got hooked into not Matt Wagner, as soon as you got hooked into Mad Magazine and Calvin and Hobbes, you were like, oh, this is now in my vein.
Yeah, well, I've even though I was more of the computer techie kind of nerdy guy growing up through high school and junior high and all that kind of stuff, I always drew. Ever since I was little, I always drew and doodle and always, gave my buddies little bitty mini comic books thing. I didn't know I was making comics. I was just drawing little funny doodles, funny drawings and stuff. And I just was, and it wasn't actually wasn't. I never thought about doing comics for a living until it was even though I bought books and stuff, but until I got to college and with Roland and Stephen Butler and Mitch Bird, where they were, we're all about at the same age level. They were a couple of years above me, but they, saw that they were getting responses from like people like you in Malibu and stuff. And I'm like, they were doing it. I can do that. That's what I've been doing it. I couldn't. And I've said this many times. I couldn't do it. I sucked. I was terrible. I got better, ramped up pretty quick. But just because I already had that mentality to be able to see and do kind of thing, I can have been able to do that with. I think that's my skill is I can see things. If I really want to do it, I study it long enough, and then all of a sudden I'm doing it, and you go, God, that guy must have been doing this forever. And it's like, no, he just started doing it a couple of days ago.
Yeah. But it sounds like another key is also that you fell into a crowd of guys who are already reading and making and talking about making comics and
they really
stories.
So I got like a quick this is what you need to do if you want to actually do this. And I guess Roland and Steven, not so much Mitch. Mitch was harder to get to like me, as we all know. We all love Mitch, but that's Mitch. But Steven and Roland were like, yeah, this guy, where did he come from? He's in the computer science department, but he can draw his butt off. Why didn't he do? And so it's their fault that I'm doing comics.
But I think, and all you guys are still doing comics.
Yeah.
Like it's been, so and Mike, when you, after you got Mage 14, when did you start drawing comics and thinking of comics as a thing?
I'm like Tommy. I've always doodled. I don't, but I think it was that period of time, when I started really getting, 12 or 13, I was sitting there copying comics and trying to learn from, what I was seeing and gravitating to certain artists and trying to make up my own stories, just, drawing on the paper and then folding it and trying to, draw my own stories and, the stuff you do when you're a kid, but you're forming, you're trying to figure out, what am I, and like I said, once I figured out these guys were making money at it, I don't know how much, but obviously, but at the time I was thinking, well, this was a job just like anything else.
Yeah. Cause if Wagner's already done 14 issues of a comic book through an independent publisher, it's like, well, somebody's making comics and making enough money to keep going through 14, 15 issues.
Exactly. I mean, and then you start really getting into the indie aesthetic. These guys. Again, as you go along, you start seeing, well, there's been 1,000 people drawing Batman, but there's only one guy that's been drawing Mage.
Right.
And you start looking at it from the point of view of your own. That was my thing. I started really looking at, well, yeah, drawing Superman would have been cool, but anything I would have done would have been owned by somebody else. Right. And the idea is, if I'm going to create my own stuff, I want it to be my own stuff.
Well, that's the thing too. I was, I never had the idea that I wanted to write Batman or write Superman or write Spider-Man. I mean, I love those characters. I love those stories, but it never occurred to me, like if Marvel came to me and said, "Hey, Tom, you got an idea for it? We need you to do it." Well, first of all, they'll never do it. But if they did come to me and they said, "Hey, Tom, you want to do a 4-issue arc on Spider-Man?" I'd be lost. I'd be like, "Well, no, I got my own thing. I got to do, I got to do this or I got to do that." And so I don't know if I have a Spider-Man story in me at this point, or even a Batman story or anything. I've got my own stories.
Right. And as we should.
Yeah. And I think, but that's not to put down anybody who has a ton of Batman stories, but I don't have it in me. And so now you watch, Marvel's going to call me Monday and say, "Hey, you want 4 issues because we heard it'll give you a hard time." So I got 2 favorite comics because I'm an old man, And my first one is the one that had the largest impact on me, and that's American Flag #1 by Howard Chaykin. Because I was pretty much out of regular comics at that time. I was looking for non-corporate stuff. I was looking for some kind of indie thing. I'd read Love and Rockets, which I think is a great comic. But I was the art director on Amazing Heroes, and I was a mediocre art director. But First Comics was launching American Flag #1, and Mike Gold was the editor at first, and he sent Amazing Heroes photocopies of the first issue to pitch the idea of doing a cover story on Flag with an interview with Chaykin or whatever. And so I read American Flag #1 from the photocopies. And I thought, well, I can't curse, but I would curse. But this is the thing that hit me like a brick. It's like when Ignatz hits Crazy with the brick that hit me in the head. It's like, this is the comic that I need, like right now. This is the thing, because it took the world of the 1980s and what the intersection of pop culture, politics, and corporate power would happen if they all sort of merged together. And I read it during the pandemic, and it's like Howard predicted so much of the way the world would turn out that we're currently living in, that I'm still in awe of it. And so I made sure I bought every issue. I got back into buying comics again. I became pals with Howard. So it's like The Godfather. You try to get out, and they pull you back in. And that's sort of for me, that's the power of American Flag. And so, that's, I'd been a Chaykin fan before then. I had a bunch of other stuff, but this was like the first time where I thought everything about him as a creator sort of meshed together as a writer, as an artist, and doing his own, like, whatever was in his head was coming out now.
That's cool.
So I was all in. And before that, when I was a tiny tyke, my favorite comic was a Charlton title of all things, called E-Man by Joe Staton and Nick Cuddy, or Nick Cuddy. I can never pronounce their name. Because it was like a new thing. It was printed on that bad Charlton Press printing machine that they had. So it looked, it was all off register and weird and muted colors, but it was fun. It was charming. It was sexy. It was clever. And it was wrapped up in one issue, and E-Man had a personality that was not like what you were getting in Marvel and DC. And it was another one of those things. And because Charlton's distribution was, at the point of a mob's machine gun, the issues were sort of hard to find. So I would drive around or pedal my bike around from, 7-Eleven to 7-Eleven to 7-Eleven to try to make sure it was coming out. So, and it was one of the first comics that I actually charted. It's like, well, it's been 4 weeks. I better start looking for the next one. So that's when I realized that comics actually came out on a regular schedule. And, you could, if they rack them every Tuesday at the newsstand, that's the day you got to show up at the 7-Eleven or the bus stop or the train station or the drugstore.
Yeah, I don't think it occurred to me until college that the books came out monthly. I just would go and, as a kid would just go, and there would be some new ones. And, that's why I have so many holes in my collection. Before college. Yeah.
And I have, and to speak to that, I have so many odd issues where it's just like, I have part 2 of something, or I have part 1 of something, or I have, it's just weird.
And something like that drives Aiden crazy. His generation, it's funny. He'll when he started getting into my collection, he'd say, "Well, Dad, you're missing this, and this. It's like, yeah, I mean, because I only could find this stuff. You're really starting early in my collections. Like, it's like I'm getting, I didn't get this one because I missed the month, or no one had it, or whatever. And like he stopped. It's like he stopped reading. It's like, well, buddy, and when I was a kid, if I missed an issue, I just read the next one. But his generation wants that complete story. It's so funny dealing with. I had to go back and buy so many back issues.
Yep.
Thank God for my comic shop.
Yeah.
.com that I was able to, feel his, but I was able just to go on to that part too. Like I said, with the Mage 14, I was able to read the story until I was able to find the other ones, because a lot of my collection was that. Because as far as learning out when the comics came out monthly, it was because the cashier at the corner drug got tired of me coming in. Was this issue? Is this issue? She finally looked at, honey, do you want us to hold the books when we come in? It's like, you can do that.
List. All right, yeah.
Look, this little old lady at this corner
You
drug,
started the pull list.
she started holding books for me because she's got tired of me coming in there saying, hey, did you have Spider-Man, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's like, no, we don't have it this week. I didn't see it. And then finally she said, well, honey, I'll write a list. And so when it comes in, I'll put it in the bag so you can do it. It's like, okay. Yes.
You found a unicorn. That's what you found.
I know. I was very lucky. I said, I had 2 or 3 pharmacies. I had a couple quick stop grocery stores. I would drive all over town. I would ride my bike all over town trying to find every piecemeal I could. The ones they were about ready to rip off to throw back to the newsstand distributor. And I had a connection. By the time I was, I had a connection to stores that, they were my hookup.
You're making deals all around town. You're like an entrepreneur, an impresario. You're carving out a niche in the local the market.
Comics were my drive. Now I want to ask you. Now when Flag, Flag was over my head. I tried picking it up, and Flag initially it was over my head. So I'll ask you the same question in comparison to mainstream comics. What was Chaykin doing? Opposed to, like I said, the commercial stuff, the more.
Well, when I was, so there a number of different things. First of all, there was actual implied sexuality between the characters. So it's definitely not a mainstream sort of comic books. And it was, and there were all these funny sort of clever puns and snappy dialogue where characters were sort of talking like movie characters instead of comic book characters.
Gotcha.
And so I gravitated towards that because there's a thing I found out about Howard later is Howard is a huge fan of Broadway musicals where they use the songs to sort of explain things. The songs have double meanings. You can't in musicals of the 30s and 40s, they couldn't come right out and say certain things. So they would bury it under these suggestive lyrics and metaphors and stuff like that. And you can tell, knowing that now, when I read Flag, I can tell that that's sort of what Howard is doing as well. Is he's got really snappy, clever dialogue, but there's an undercurrent of stuff going on that you really have to pay attention to sort of get the second layer.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that the first time, but I got that the second time because it was one of the comics that I started to reread, and I could just pick up. And like right now, I have the trades, but every time I come across a back issue at a convention for $1 or $2 or whatever, I pick it up and I read it again. And it's out of sequence, it's out of continuity, but I'll read. I read issue 8 last summer, then I read issue 6 again, and it's just like I can dive back in. It's sort of like at this point it's like a favorite show or a favorite movie where you can sort of join in at any time.
Yeah.
And still get a kick out of it. So I just a huge fan. And
now, does he own it? Because I remember when first they had a lot of they had some sketchy ownerships of most of their books. And I remember he left the book, didn't he, for a while?
Yeah, he left, and then but he was sort of overseeing it, and then he came back to it, and then first I think folded. And you're right, there was sketchy is probably the correct word, because comic book companies that are always started by people who are not comic book fans
True.
are always
And not business people either.
and not business people. Yeah, they're you always hear about it. Oh, he's a sports guy, or he's a he's a race car driver, or he's an actor, or whatever. It's like, well, okay, but comic book people really do better at starting comic book companies than race car drivers or whatever. And so I think the rights were tied up in limbo, just because first, whatever. And again, I'm going to get this wrong, and somebody's going to weigh in and oh, Mason got it wrong, but it's some variation of Howard had certain rights, but they had certain rights, but neither party could do anything with their piece of the rights, because you needed both halves. You needed the yin and the yang.
Yeah. I knew that with Nexus, Dark Horse and Mike Richardson bought them, and then he turned around and gave it to Baron, and
Yes.
he just gave it to him. So and then Badger, Mike does own Badger. Whatever entity is First Comics now owns Badger. I think they're putting the #1 issue out. Baron didn't even know they're putting that right now.
That's too bad, because
Yeah.
Badger is basically Baron's personality, and I think the two are just way. It's like Mage and Grendel and Wagner. It's like those are all, especially Mage. Mage is an extension of Wagner. So you can't, I'm not going to write Mage.
And who would? You wouldn't
Right.
want to.
I wouldn't want to. I want to read Mage. I don't want to write Mage.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. But yeah, ownership back in the 80s, I was really surprised, because, those early days of the color indie guys, they owned a lot of stuff. They had some kind of ownership stake in it. And so it really wasn't that creator-owned thing. They had a lot more creative control.
Right.
But as far as the rights, it's like you said, they were more divided with the publishers.
And I think, and it's funny, those sort of shared rights deals can be okay if the company survives, but it's when the company goes out of business or changes owners or gets bought and sold or does something weird that the rights sort of get complicated, and then all of a sudden you need some Disney lawyers to step in and
hopefully not
make your favorite comic a reality again. Because I know Howard had worked for Atlas Seaboard when they launched, and he'd done 2 issues of a comic book called The Scorpion. And then he left that book, and then he just basically took that same character and recreated it for Marvel as Dominic Fortune.
Yep.
And I think Rich Buckler did that too with a character called Demon Hunter. He just moved that over to Marvel, and it became a character that looks exactly the same, but has a different name.
Yeah, what was that name? I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I forget. It was all over the internet like a year ago or 2 years ago, and then it went out of my head.
Oh yeah, the William and
oh yeah, it's like the situation because Elementals is one of those comics. It's like a no-brainer. It's like Earth, Wind, Fire, Water, whatever. That's like a great superhero premise. He should have been a millionaire.
Yeah.
But all right, Mr. Flormani, do you have a second comic?
Anything back from the 80s and 90s, I guess that looked really good, because you guys are talking about stuff that was written really well, and I was just always, if it was visually appealing, then I grabbed it, because I was trying to come up with a look of my, because I'm like, at this point I'm going to break into comics, I better have a look. So I was just grabbing anything and everything that looked good. I just had so much stuff. When I actually moved down to Orlando, I gave everything away except for all my Spider-Man stuff, and then a couple of here and there books. Something that I really like. I think I kept all of my Captain Atom books. I think that was a fun series at the time. One of the earlier books that I got was one of these. And I got it here. I got the trade of it anyway. That was Spider-Man Legends of the Spider Clan, just because of the way it looked. This is, I guess, the first time I ever started to know who Scotty Young was.
Oh yeah.
because just that wonky stuff. Now he doesn't really kind of draw that so much this way now, but this look, when I'm drawing my own stuff, I go through this all the time, and I'm like, I'm going to steal that face. I'm going to draw this. Because this is just wonky enough that I really just love. I mean, can't you? Oops, you can't see nothing on my stupid screen thing. Can't you see? Forget it.
The great thing about Scotty Young is you would think, there's no way he'd be working in contemporary Marvel comics, but he actually is, and he does a great job at it. And I've seen him do guest covers and his funny fairy tale stuff, and it's killer.
Yeah, it was at the same time that that he was also doing that Human Torch story. God, you just cannot see anything on my screen.
No,
he did a whole Human Torch series, and boy, I just love Scotty Young stuff. I love it more so back then, but the newer stuff I'm not as keen to. But
David Rios says I love Scotty, both his writing and his art.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That and Humberto Ramos. Those guys had that weirdo, that weird quirky style. When I got to ink some of Humberto's stuff back when I was working.
Well, he and J. Scott Campbell and a couple others were like the first guys who were like, they were kind of like John Byrne, but they were also kind of like anime and manga stuff.
I love Sam Keith.
They were really like a blend of all these contemporaries. They just. I mean, when I first saw Humberto Ramos' stuff, I just stared at it. It's like, wow, this
neat.
This guy.
Well, it's kind of like the Mitch Bird's. They don't draw the same, but it's got that weird wonkiness to all the figures and stuff. It's people have body parts. They got a head, they got a torso, they got legs, they got arms. But just the weird way that these guys draw this stuff is what I've always tried to emulate when I'm doing my own stuff, because I'm just copying other people's stuff.
Nice.
But there we go. Dave Rio says, I got lucky to color some of Humberto Ramos' stuff, like his 2029 number one book. Yeah. So because it's just interesting to see where these sort of hot styles come from, and how they sort of blend favorite artists together to create like a third artist.
But then it kind of bleeds over into all the Walking Dead stuff, that at least the beginning parts of it anyway. Just I had a first issue copy, so I don't know where it's at. I also had a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the first issue. I don't know where it's at anymore.
You could retire.
I was going to say, I'd find those.
Yes. No, they're gone. They're gone. I probably gave the away. To be honest with you, I have tried to look for both the Walking Dead ones, the first run, and then of the Teenage Ninja Turtle stuff. I don't know where they are. They're gone.
No, you better.
They're gone. I'm not going to look for them anymore. They're gone. I'm not worried about it. It's there. What's gone is gone, right? What can you do about it?
Well, because going back to your thing about art and how you would follow the artist or whatever. I was an artist follower rather than a writer. Because there were guys like Kaluta or Wrightson or whatever, where I would get their books. I would get whatever book they were on, and I would not read it first. Like I would go through the pages, and I would just look at the double page spreads and look at the art. And then I would go back and read. I would do this with Claremont and Byrne's X-Men too. Like I'd want to read it, but I really want to see what John Byrne was doing. So I would flip through the book first before I would go back and read it.
Yeah.
Because I loved Byrne's art so much on that book and Austin's inks, and it just, for me, that was much like Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin on Batman. It's like that to me was as pure as comics could ever get. So
I love this little book called Scud, the Disposable Assassin.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Good
I
stuff.
love Rob Schraub stuff. I've got this big compendium thing but I've got all of the first run, and plus some of those other weird books that he did at the time. They're in a drawer. And then of course all the Image versions when he finally started coming out with Image. This stuff was just so cool.
Yeah.
Love this stuff.
And what's great about that sort of explosion of independent comics is none of these guys were ever going to work for Marvel or DC and do those kind of books. Like you could pitch Scud the Disposable Assassin to Marvel and DC until you were dead, and they were never going to publish it. So the only option was to do it as an independent comic, and that's sort of what makes me deliriously happy, is because I could find it.
The Johnny, the homicidal maniac.
Oh yeah.
God, I've got all those because those are the ones I did keep. I kept that kind of stuff because they were just so cool. I loved how what's that guy's name? The homicidal maniac guy.
Johan.
Johan Vasquez.
When we went when Barry, I, and Jennifer and Renee went, but she didn't set up. When we went to San Diego for the very, very first time in early '90s or whatever, I sat right next to that guy and whatever, and just bought all his stuff.
Yeah,
it was so cool.
Dave Rio says, "Loved martial law." Oh, me too. There's a great one with I think it's martial law, about a superhero who keeps killing off his sidekicks. Basically, sort of a pseudo parody of Batman and Robin, where the Batman character keeps sending his sidekicks off into danger and they keep getting killed. I think that's martial law, and if it's not, it's still a comic I love.
I just picked up. They're not filed away yet, but it's just Amazing Spider. That for me, Amazing Spider-Man has always been it. I have nowhere close to a complete run, of course not. Especially the first ones. But I've got a couple of early ones, and for me, getting books weren't really about getting the best of the books. If it was the cover was half ripped off and I could get it for $5, I'm going to grab it. I didn't care. I was reading the stupid thing. But
so where do you fall in the pantheon of Spider-Man artists?
It's for me, because it still goes back to the 80s and 90s and stuff when I was breaking in. I grabbed all of these. I still had all of the early stuff, but I wasn't really paying attention to names and stuff. I was just looking at the look of the books, the way that they. But for me, it's always still the Eric Larson and I just loved how his how cartoony Spider-Man and clean he looked and all that kind of stuff. And then of course Mr. McFarlane's Spider-Man was cool. And was it Mark? What's his name after
Mark Bagley?
Bagley, yeah. Just met him a bunch of times at shows. He was trying to give me several times he gave me samples to try to do, and that's when I was working at in the Spider-Man office.
Right.
I never got to ink him on anything, but that was pretty cool.
He was great. I'm a David
but the earlier guys, it's just all of them. Of course, I don't. Of course, if I go through, I can pick out their names and stuff. But just right off, my name recognition really starts in the late 80s, early 90s when I finally got into college. That's when I started paying attention to who was doing what.
Right.
It was more of I would just get Spider-Man books and who I didn't care who was drawing. It was just Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. But as far as the artists and stuff, it was just that McFarlane, Larson, Bagley, Rain.
Yeah. 80s, 90s guys.
Yeah.
I'm a big Ditko fan, I think, but I think it's because when you read the issues in order later in life, you can actually see Ditko grow as the artist, and you can see him become. It's the same thing with Barry Windsor Smith on Conan. You can actually see Barry Windsor Smith become Barry Windsor Smith.
Yeah.
And for me, they're on the book long enough, and they started when they were really rough around the edges that they become the artist that everybody recognizes, and that to me is one of the sort of the beauties of comics, is you can see somebody who is still rough and ragged become a major talent.
Yeah.
So
well, I always liked all the X-Men Jim Lee guys and all that kind of stuff, and I needed to learn, so I picked up those books not to read them so much, just so I could ink that way if something came across. But I didn't ever want to draw like Jim Lee or any. I wanted to draw like Eric Larson kind of Spider-Man-y than Jim Lee.
Right.
If Jim Lee was drawing Spider-Man, or
No, I gravitated toward Larson because Larson could write his stuff.
Yeah.
And Larson's sensibilities seemed to go with his art pretty well. Like he was like, I don't think I don't want to see Eric Larson. I mean, it's not my choice or anything, but I don't want to see Eric Larson draw what somebody else writes. I want to see Eric Larson draw what he writes.
His own stuff.
Yeah. That's sort of where I fall. But
when he started doing the dragon, the Savage Dragon, it was like, that's perfect for him. Yeah,
it absolutely is. And also, it's a character that he created when he was a kid, and he sort of nurtured it along, and got to do it his way. So, what about you, Mike? Do you have a second favorite?
I do. Let's see. Since we're talking mainstream, and you were talking about Byrne, Captain America. This is not my first Captain America, but it was the first one I found in the back issue.
Right.
And it, you're basically, it's Captain America versus Baron Blood and the Marvel Golden Age with Union Jack and Spitfire and I remember just grabbing this basic on the cover. I didn't have really any knowledge because I was able to at least find both issues. It was a two-parter.
Wow.
And in the back issues, and it basically all it is it's a Captain America versus Baron Blood, and you get a little Marvel history and Roger Stern writing, and John Byrne art, with Joe Rubinstein doing the inks.
Yep.
You really can't. This is peak superhero stuff. I mean, this is for me when I think of Marvel, I think of Byrne, I think of that mid 80s period of just, pure imagination. Sure, by the day standards, it's the typical Jim Shooter editorial of over exposition and spending way too much recapping the previous issue because you wanted to make sure whoever was reading this knew what happened last issue. But it's just an action story. It really is. There's no deep thinking behind it. It's just basically Captain America trying to figure out, is Baron Blood back from the dead or from being killed by a stake, or who exactly are doing these murders, and he's thinking back and flashbacking to the war. Like I said, I ate it up. I still, it's very worn. Both issues are extremely worn, as I've read it very much, and I had to buy the Byrne trade because I knew eventually I'm going to wear these suckers out.
Right.
And so he was on it. Byrne was only on Captain America for 9 issues. Both him and Stern were only on it for 9 issues. But in that little 9-issue period, they crossed so many, like I said, little tick boxes of what you want to do with Captain America.
What's interesting is because, and again, I know this gets me in all kinds of trouble, is that I think Byrne's best work is in collaboration with other writers. And I think his two best writers are Stern and Claremont.
Yeah.
And I know that Claremont and Byrne had disagreements over stuff, but I think that made for a really great partnership.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
I think the Stern stuff, the stuff that he collaborated with Stern, is a little stronger as far as collaboration.
Right.
But probably the Claremont stuff is the epic stuff.
Yes. So my second one would be Marvel Team Up, because it's a toss up between that and Master of Kung Fu, but Marvel Team Up was great because they were one and done.
Yeah.
And it was always Spider-Man and somebody else, and I knew that I wasn't going to be in. I knew I had enough comics where there were epic arcs going on, where there was a 12-issue storyline or 8-issue storyline or whatever. Marvel Team Up was one and done. So if I just had 10 minutes, I could see Spider-Man and character X, have a misunderstanding, fight it out, solve their problem, and defeat a villain, and all be done in 22 pages, and I'm out. And that was, to me, that was like the popcorn of comics.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got their long runs, but some of those one-issue stories can be just as fulfilling. Sometimes you don't want. I mean, you could have a stack of books, and you don't want have to keep up with mega stories on every one of them.
No, and
Sometimes you just want to be in and out.
there's a great comic that Marvel did. I think it's Marvel Premiere. I think it's issue number 31. It's the Infinity Formula with Nick Fury, where Starlin wrote it, Chaykin drew it, and it's basically how come Nick Fury doesn't age. And it's one and done. And there's a formula. This is from an old memory, so I might be getting it wrong. There's a formula that Nick Fury drinks or injects or whatever. And that's what keeps him young. He's running out of formula. He's got to get some more. Story begins. So it's like a James Bond version of Nick Fury, and it's fantastic, and it's one and done. They do it in 22 pages.
It's always cool that you got a couple of characters that you know their background story. You throw them in a quick little side project. They're done, and you don't have to consider the whole arcing universe of everything going on.
And it's like, and I don't have to have Nick Fury explained to me because I know he's Sergeant Fury from the comics,
right?
And that's pretty much it. And then there's that nerd thing of like, well, yeah, how come he doesn't age? And then boom, there it is.
And a lot of those are subjects that aren't going to be talked about in their continuing books, right?
Right.
Why would they? How are they going to introduce that in a regular story? This needs to be its own little side project.
Yeah, it's like the after school special of comics, where it's just there's one little thing, and it's just it's super memorable.
Yeah, it's like these. Oh yeah, you still can't see out there. It's these giant size one shot type things, and like you're saying,
man, I loved all of those because I loved all of the fringe things in the Marvel universe. Like I read Spider-Man, I read Fantastic Four, I read The Incredible Hulk, and those are all ongoing titles. But the stuff that I really loved was all this weird stuff that Marvel did that came out on the edges, the annuals and special issues and crazy treasury editions and team ups and premieres and Marvel 2-in-1 and the monster comics, and it's just I was a nut for the things that are out on the fringes. And that may have fueled my interest in sort of indie comics, because those things, in hindsight, Howard the Duck and Giant Sized Man Thing and Werewolf by Night, those are basically feel like indie comics that somehow snuck in to the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
Hey, did you know there's an ad in here so you can you get more powerful muscles really fast? Right there. We ought to see if that's still available. I could use that right now.
Yeah, he said, is that a Florida post office box?
Or
a New York City post office box?
Michigan.
Of course.
Yeah, Michigan.
Now they usually
cartoons for money. Look,
they usually move those to Nevada or Delaware, where there's they
big warehouse
for free.
New York, New Jersey.
That's
here's a bodybuilding course for Pendulum Products, and it's in Brooklyn.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, here's a coin. Check this out. This is good for Halloween. There's a coin. Wait a minute. Where's it? Where's my camera? This doesn't work. There's a coin that can hypnotize people.
Oh, there we go.
Hypnotize a hypno coin for free.
Are there little jagged rays of electricity coming out of the coin to simulate?
Yeah, that's what the picture shows. I wonder how much was it? $1. $1.
That's like $400 in 2024 money.
There's 204 Revolutionary War soldiers for $2.99.
That's drawn by Russ Heath, by the way.
Ah.
Your camera does your pictures good.
Well, Mike Belcher is up with the new technology, Tommy.
I'm telling you. Look at the back. I don't know why, but it's a bunch of fishing rods and stuff.
Well, because kids who read comics, they love to fish.
They love to go fishing.
They do.
And many is a time I would put down an issue of Batman and say, "Hey, Dad, when are we going fishing?"
A 411-piece fishing rod set for $14.95. I'm buying that right now.
I wish we could talk to a kid who bought that. That would be awesome.
Yeah, to see what they ended up getting.
Well, I want to talk to a kid who got the backyard submarine or the live monkey.
Oh, this book is so cool.
Oh man! All right, gentlemen, we are
It smells like old comics.
we are
Yes,
at
they
this.
do.
We are at the 6 o'clock hour on our fill-in issue of Silverline Silver Sunday.
Yeah, woohoo!
So,
Hey, do you want to? Are we allowed to kind of mention our little secret project? Or we're not going to talk about it yet.
well, we're going to talk. I'll talk about this just so Roland doesn't bite our heads off. You can say that Tommy and Tom have a project that we're working on for Silverline with me doing the writing and Tommy doing the inking, and we have an artist nearly signed up for the pencils,
Yep.
and we have it slated for 2025. But this is not the other project I'm doing for Roland.
No, you've still got your main project. This is more of what kind of fits into the
Silverline universe.
to this kind of a deal. Kind of
Yes.
a thing.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, it's more like a giant size Silverline special.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What's it gonna
and
be?
it's going to be great goofy fun with a new Silverline character.
Yeah.
So,
Woohoo!
yeah.
Whoopity.
So it's and I believe that all three of us are going to be doing it because we're going to enlist Mr. Belcher to letter the heck out of it.
I will be glad to
So-
do that.
It'd be so
because I'm very you may not have noticed this as a writer, but I'm fairly chatty, so it'll be it's gonna be lots of balloons, Mr. Belcher.
And let's make sure your artist puts them on the right side of the panels so that I don't have to cross things too.
Oh,
Well,
that's
one of the
right.
things
And I will draw missing legs that if the penciler doesn't put them in the drawings. I will add we'll fix
one of the things that I've learned, probably the greatest trick I ever learned as a comic book writer, is to always, in the description, list the character who is speaking first in the description.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that
Because you know how to write a script.
but that eliminates a lot of confusion because
It does.
people tend to draw the action before they look where the dialogue is, and so if you say the second character first, that's what you get, and that leads to those weird
Messed up
cross
word
balloon tails.
tails flying everywhere, chopping people's heads off.
Right, and
Mhm.
And you end up getting the ones that have the little jumpy jump thing that jumps over another word balloon tail, and it's like,
Right.
oh, that looks so bad.
it's like I love clever word balloons, like when Ken Bruzenak does the stuff for Chaikin, where the balloons go every which way and you follow along. But that's part of the narrative storytelling, and it's easy to do, and the balloons don't cross. But when the balloons cross because characters are speaking out of order or drawn out of order, it's like, oh man, somebody. And some of that stuff you can fix with Photoshop, but a lot of that stuff you really can't
right.
fix. It's drawn the way it's drawn, so now you're stuck.
Flip the panel. Rotate it, but flip it. So that
Also,
way-
Roland will laugh at me if I get it wrong. So he'll. I have to do two things. I have to edit myself, and then I have to edit based on how Roland's going to make fun of me. So, all right, gentlemen.
Yes.
Thank you all for joining us. Whoever's out there, thanks for listening. This has been the fill-in issue of Silverline Silver Sunday.
Oh, look,
with,
the cup shows up.
with-
Nothing else would show up, but the cups were.
Of course, the cup shows up because it's not 4-color. It's not printed on
Apparently
paper.
not, yeah, whatever.
So join us next week. I have no idea what the topic is.
I
On
don't
Tuesday, join us for whatever Tuesday is, and on Wednesday,
Join us for the Tuesday show.
join us whatever Wednesday is for the Wednesday Whammers. And Tuesday doesn't have anything. Make mine Silverline.
Yes,
Mine
sir.
Silverline.
Do-do-do-do.
Hey, I'm G-Rod. Make mine Silverline. You heard me.